Welcome back to the Georgia Show. I'm obviously not in the studio. We had a power outage, so I am at an undisclosed location. Bill, how are you doing today?
I am well. I was up late last night listening to the president and watching the celebration on the National Mall. It was fascinating and pretty darn dramatic.
Yeah, a lot going on from that to international affairs to a lot of disclosure, which is what we want to talk about today. We're brought to you by the Georgia Record, georgiarecord.com. Please follow us on CDM_press or Georgia Record on X, CDM1 on Rumble, and CDM on YouTube. And just stay in touch with us. We're putting out a lot of content across the network and really appreciate your support. What do we got today, Bill?
Well, we're going to cover a kind of an interesting range of subjects. We're going to talk about a program known as MK Ultra that is part of the disclosures this week in Congress. This has been talked about now for decades, believe it or not, even into some fiction movies back in the 80s and before. And we're going to talk about what it is in general, and the fact that it is broader than most people believe. We'll talk about the timing. We'll talk about some of the people that may have been involved according to the testimony that we've heard so far. And we're going to try to help people understand the broad scope of what this is so that as more comes out, they'll be able to paste that in and understand more and more as the testimony continues. And this could go on for quite some time. We'll also talk about the celebration. It was very interesting. There were some hiccups in the process, yet the president spoke last night, beginning about 11:17 at night, and had wonderful things to say. And then the largest fireworks show in history went off behind the stage, and we'll show you some clips of that. We'll have a couple other things as well, and I know you've got some amazing reporting to do with regard to some things here in Georgia and elsewhere.
Yes, I want to talk about the flock safety and the flock camera surveillance system. It's an Atlanta-based company that's drawing a lot of attention for what they're doing. And also talked with the Congregationalist pastor, Pastor Gettr, about how to retake the mainline churches. So we will get into all of that later in the show, but let's get started.
Okay. All right, let's start with this. MK Ultra. At one point, many people had been told and thought that this was somebody's pipe dream. This was made up and a quote unquote conspiracy theory. However, it is only too real. And you're going to hear testimony from Anna Paulina Luna and witnesses that testified before Congress on this. And this is just the beginning. The first thing to think about here is MK Ultra is, I'll call it an umbrella term. Within MK Ultra, there's a number of different programs that you will hear about. We won't go through all of those today, but literally could be tens, dozens, perhaps, that had different focuses. But in general, the concept of MK Ultra came not from necessarily fully within the U.S., but as part of a pre-existing program that we're going to talk about. And in general was meant to be able to steer, influence, and perhaps even control people's thinking and perhaps actions. I know that sounds science fiction-y, but as you learn more about this, you will see how they developed techniques and drugs and perhaps devices to help drive exactly those things. Let's start with Anna Paulina Luna opening the hearing on MK Ultra.
This hearing is about the crimes committed by the Central Intelligence Agency against the American citizens and the decades of secrecy used to conceal them. The American people deserve a complete and truthful record. The victims and their families deserve acknowledgement, and this Congress has a constitutional obligation to ensure that full declassification is not delayed any longer. Project MKUltra was not a policy failure or an overzealous program that got out of hand. It was a deliberate, systematic governmental operation that subjected American citizens, prisoners, hospital patients, veterans, ordinary people to LSD, electroshock, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, psychological torture without their knowledge or consent. This went on for 20 years on American soil, funded by American taxpayer dollars and authorized by the very top of U.S. intelligence apparatus. And this program, when it did end, the men who ran it did not cooperate with investigators. They did not come forward. They committed another crime. They destroyed evidence. The documents this task force has reviewed are unambiguous. In January 1973, the director of the CIA, Richard Helms, prepared to leave office. He personally ordered the destruction of MKUltra records. The CIA official document in writing states, over my stated objectives, the MKUltra files were destroyed by the order of DCI Mr. Helms shortly before his departure from office. A separate internal account confirms that Helms telephoned Dr. Gottlieb directly and instructed him to destroy, quote, all files pertaining to drug research and associated activities. Gottlieb compiled 4 people, spent an entire day burning down 152 files. Then Gottlieb had his personal papers destroyed by his secretary before he retired. The head of the CIA-owned records center protested the destruction in writing, but he was overruled. That is obstruction of justice. That is criminal destruction of federal records, and neither individuals were ever charged with a crime for it. Helms received a $2,000 fine for lying to Congress about an unrelated matter and collected his government pension until he died. Gottlieb retired in rural Virginia and wrote poetry. No one went to prison. No victim was ever formally compensated by the government for the harm that they caused. By 1975, the Church Committee and the Rockefeller Commission had already established through sworn testimony and the surviving 1963 Inspector General report that MKUltra existed and that the CIA had run a program of human experimentation on unwitting Americans.
Okay, let's focus on a couple things you just heard. You heard the names Helms and you heard the name Gottlieb. That is Dr. Gottlieb. You're going to hear his name further as we get into, in some parts perhaps today, but certainly as we move forward, you're going to hear his name associated with individuals whose names you may know only too well. And those connections become ominous as we learn more. Let's take a look at a post by Anna Paulina Luna that sets kind of the stage for all the different things you're going to need to learn to understand this. So what does the CIA, Nazi Germany, and Nuremberg trials all have in common? MKUltra. She then says, I will be meeting with German Parliament tomorrow to identify and locate victims of MKUltra buried in Germany at the hand of the U.S. government. Victims buried in Germany at the hand of the U.S. government. What could that possibly mean? So well,
Bill, there was a period after the surrender where the German people were treated very badly by the U.S. government and the Russians, I might add. And millions were killed or hurt or persecuted and buried. So it could be that they took some of those people and used them as guinea pigs. Who knows?
Who knows? It begins to sound in some ways similar to some of the things we've heard about Fauci, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. And we'll come back to that. So she noticed Nazi Germany. Following the war, there was a program known as Project Paperclip, wherein about 1,600, perhaps more, German scientists in a number of different disciplines were brought into the country. They were positioned, the explanation at the time and largely since has been, oh, well, these people were very smart. They had done a lot of technological development within Germany. And yes, they were working with the Nazis, but in many cases they were forced to. But we brought them over so that America could benefit from their research and learning. Let's hear Anna Paulina Luna talk a bit about Project Paperclip.
Brought over 1,600 German scientists into the United States government after World War II, including individuals who had conducted human experimentation in concentration camps. The CIA and military were aware of their backgrounds and recruited them anyways. In your research, did you find direct documentation between Paperclip scientists and the development of MKUltra's experimental protocols, specifically the use of mescaline, hypnosis, and sensory deprivation, which were techniques also documented at Dachau?
Absolutely. Kurt Blome, who was the chief of biological weapons development for the Nazi government, came to work for the CIA. So did Walter Schreiber, who was the Surgeon General of the Nazi Army. I can just tell a brief story. When I was researching my book, I found what I think might be the first secret CIA prison or black site. It's a nice chalet in Germany. And the guy who now owns it took me into the basement. He said these were the cells where the MK Ultra officers, working side by side with Nazis, carried out those gruesome experiments, which were actually just continuations of the experiments that those Nazis had been conducting just a few years earlier right down the road.
Just for timeline and clarification, these experiments were happening after the Nuremberg trials, correct? So the CIA would have known that these were crimes against humanity.
I looked for an episode in which the Nuremberg doctrines were posted on the wall in some MK Ultra or CIA office, and I was never able to find any indication that those Nuremberg principles ever were even consulted, much less obeyed.
Thank you.
Okay, so to what we talked about so far, CIA operating in Germany itself, continuing research, continuing experimentation and trials of MK Ultra techniques and technologies after the Nuremberg trials. And the Nuremberg trials, of course, had to do with human rights and crimes against humanity committed by a number of the Nazis during World War II. So what was the goal here, and why was the CIA continuing these? Also, why were they doing it in Germany? Was it easier to hide in Germany? Was it easier to keep the people involved? We'll probably learn about that as we go forward. Keep in mind that the overriding goal of this is to be able to structure people's thinking and influence their ideas, their thoughts, their perceptions, and so forth. And it isn't just individuals necessarily. There are techniques and there are programs that we're going to learn about within MK Ultra that are meant to influence groups, large groups in many cases. You've seen on our program in the past, Project Mockingbird. Mockingbird is a name for a program whereby, by repeating information, even if it's false, even if it's wrong, but repeating it across multiple media, multiple locations, multiple networks, one can, if you will, can influence what people think. So when Trump years ago began calling the mainstream media fake media, what do you think he was referring to? Was it in part the fact that our media was feeding false information to us across multiple networks, not just one, but across multiple networks, multiple times and consistently over time? We've shown those videos in the past. We'll probably do it again in the coming days, but remember Project Mockingbird as one of these, or Operation Mockingbird as one of these techniques. The next one is going to get into some individuals which have now been connected to some of these pieces of MK Ultra. This is going to largely raise some real questions, some real hackles, and will be difficult for many to accept on first blush. But listen to what they find and listen to what names are involved in this. And then we're going to go back to something that was reported about a year ago.
Expert opinion that Jack Ruby and Manson were assets of the intelligence agency specifically pertaining to MK Ultra. Were they MK Ultra victims?
Yeah, theoretically, Manson, I've never been able to prove absolutely. Jack Ruby, I believe, this is something else. The Warren Commission investigation, on the Warren Commission was Alan Dulles, the former CIA director, who authorized and ran MK Ultra until he was fired by President Kennedy. The liaison to the committee for the CIA, who handled the information coming from the CIA back and forth to the Warren Commission, was Richard Helms, who was a direct supervisor of Jolly West. They knew who West was. They knew that what West was capable of and what they had paid him to do and what he had reported to them that he could do, including inducing mental disorders in people. That was never disclosed to the commission as far as anyone knows. So I believe that Wes was put in there to keep Jack Ruby from telling his story.
Wow. In closing, I just want to thank you all for being here today, and we will be following.
So Jack Ruby, let's make sure everybody knows who Jack Ruby is. He is the gentleman who shot Lee Harvey Oswald in the hours and I guess a day or two after his assassination, after the assassination of JFK in Dallas, Texas. So Jack Ruby is now attached to this MK Ultra series of steps that were taken. Moreover, Alan Dulles, the chairman of the Warren Commission, past leader of the CIA, who actually had been, I believe, fired by Kennedy just days or weeks before Kennedy's assassination, appears to have been involved in MK Ultra by nature of his relationship and leadership of the CIA. Second, Charles Manson. Now, remember about a year ago, Candace Owens, of all people, brought forward a report tying Charles Manson to the CIA and suggesting that there was something broader, more managed, more operational in what transpired with regard to Charles Manson. That was the nature and the content of a book called Chaos, and Candace Owens called this out.
That was the guy testifying there, Bill, the author.
And for many at the time, this was perhaps a bridge too far. You know, how could this possibly be? Charles Manson? Well, he was just a nut who, killed a pregnant starlet and a number of other people. Perhaps not. And as we learn more, this could get pretty darn dark. Now, think of it for the moment. We've already heard about two people in historical areas of something that nefarious happened in our history. JFK assassination and the Charles Manson murders. And they're both tied to MK Ultra. Wow.
I think you're going to find a lot more, Bill. I think you're going to see all these school shootings, a lot of these assassinations. I think this is still going on. I have no evidence of that, but I just think that's what's been happening, kind of the evolution of this system, if you will.
Well, we've talked many times, and you've noted in the past, we're pretty good at spotting patterns. Mm-hmm. And what we begin seeing here is a pattern of unexpected, aberrant behavior. Mm-hmm. That's inexplicable. Why would somebody change their behavior so dramatically? Why somebody in a given role in life would put themselves in this unusual other situation? We're going to hear a lot more about that. We won't speculate today, but again, if you start thinking about the nature of some of these crimes, bombings, shootings, other things, and begin to look for patterns, I believe that as we learn more, we're going to see that a number of these people, as you suggested, may have had ties back to one or more aspects of this overriding program.
And it's always the consequences of the behavior. What is the agenda? What are they driving towards? Gun control is a big one. If you're a surveillance state, you don't want people armed. So how would you work to try to get rid of the weapons? I mean, that's probably what's been going on. But back to
that's exactly right. As usual, Tim Burchett chimed in during the hearing and asked, the question that everybody probably needs to ask themselves now. This was told to us this was fictitious. It was conspiracy theory when it first came up back in the 60s. But now we find out, no, it's real. And so Tim Burchett formed a key question about that. Let's listen to this.
Minutes.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Thank you all for being here. I remembered when all the talk about MK Ultra broke, and then they were talking about lawsuits, and there were lawsuits, and the CIA and the federal government said that this didn't exist, and then they came back and said, well, it does exist, And then, but we're not doing it anymore. I guess my question to y'all first is, which lie do we believe? Because, thank you. Obviously, there was an open bar before this thing started, so thank y'all. But Dr. Kinzer? Hit your mic, brother. You're not on the mic. It's an old CIA trick. I'm just kidding.
I put myself in the place of one of those senior CIA officers, and I'm thinking to myself, like the ones back in the 1950s, well, other people must be doing this. We'd be falling behind if we don't do it. And nobody's looking over our shoulders. And that, I think, is your job. So I think there is a definite air of urgency and total secrecy. If any current research is going on, and if it's conducted in any comparable level of secrecy to the original MK Ultra, it's very deeply secret.
But one thing you said, though, it's going to be hard for Congress to act when they're so dadgum compromised.
So did you hear him say, if there is anything going on currently, it would be very deeply secret? Okay, keep that in mind for the next few minutes. Also keep in mind that this whole notion of MK Ultra is not one thing. It's not just, drugs used on people. It's not just technologies used on people. It's not just sensory deprivation. In some cases, it appears to include weaponry. Let's listen to this testimony.
Entry or exit wound. How they're designed is to make the target feel like they're crazy, like they're imagining things, especially on the low duration, the low intensity, long duration hits.
Are either of you aware of any individuals who have AHI symptoms have passed away from their ailments?
I do. I do.
Have any of you three panelists ever seen one of these weapons?
I have seen a 1991 version of the weapon, and it looks like a satellite dish with a unit this size attached to it. And of course, over the years, miniaturization has been possible. Obviously, there's a limitation to how miniaturized it can be because of the antenna size, which is always related to the wave. But still, it is something that can be well contained in the trunk of a car or even a large backpack. Okay.
So now we learn, holy smokes, there are weapons within the schema of the MK Ultra program. I want to go back to something that we talked about a few minutes ago. Bear with me for a second here. We said that a number of the folks that ended up in the scientific community in the U.S. were brought in via a program called Project Paperclip that was orchestrated by the CIA and other agencies, but primarily the CIA. One of those is quite notable, and in this article they call out the rocketry area. One of those is Wernher von Braun. Many people, especially growing up, I used to follow space exploration and the early space program and so forth quite avidly. And in the 1940s, Wernher von Braun was part of the team that developed the V-2 liquid-fueled rocket that was used by the Nazis during World War II. This caused a high degree of havoc because it was more accurate, flew farther, and was more predictable than virtually anything else that had been developed at that time. This gentleman was brought in via Project Paperclip, and in 1960 joined NASA and became director of the Marshall Space Flight Center. Director. He was then involved in many of the different space programs, one of the key ones being the Saturn V missions, which included all the Apollo missions ending up landing on the moon and such over the coming decade. Fascinating. Will we learn more about Wernher von Braun and his relationships? I suspect we will. We're already seeing some interesting indications of timing around things like the formation of the Jet Propulsion Lab, originally started by Jack Parsons and others within NASA and other places. Keep in mind, 1,600 scientists were brought in via Project Paperclip. If this is starting to feel like, gosh, I'm not sure I can believe all this, you can actually find it for yourselves. One of the places I would recommend you begin is a website known as the CIA Reading Room, and it's www.cia.gov/reading room. And you can do a search query on either MK Ultra, or as we learn more about the other programs underlying the umbrella of MK Ultra, you can find those as well. Now, you will find a number of different articles or listings on each one, because they've included news that happened at the time and so forth. But a little bit of research, and you'll actually be able to get down to the actual documents. Here's an example of one that talks about MK Ultra, and this goes back to, let's say, I can't quite read the date, but back in the 60s, it looks like. And so this is what you can find. You can actually find the documents that underpin this. And these have been disclosed slowly in some cases, more quickly in others. But some of these have been out there quite a long time. It's just that people didn't know to look. We talked about Charles Manson. We talked about Jack Ruby. We talked about chaos. Okay.
Let me just jump in there, because there's an evolution of this. You may be getting to it, but it's not just the personal weapons, it's controlling humanity is the ultimate goal, right? So you look at geoengineering and weather modification used as weapons. I spoke with this very senior person in the Department of War recently, and I asked him point blank, I said, is the US government using geoengineering and weather modification against the US population? And he looked down, which is kind of a tell that, I caught him, and he said, very slowly, not in this administration. So that tells me that this is up the game and the scale of this to a much bigger level that hopefully will be revealed, and we'll find out, which is going to be difficult to listen to and understand, Bill, for many.
Yes. One of the things that you asked earlier, and one of the comments that one of the witnesses made was, if this were going on currently, then it would be very deeply secret. This gentleman is going to tell you what he believes is going on, and also will note something that was done literally just this year during Tulsi Gabbard's investigation of both the JFK assassination and MK Ultra.
Refused to provide information necessary to understand why analytical standards at the CIA were violated. The CIA illegally monitored the computer and phone usage of DIG personnel, their investigations, and contact with whistleblowers. These were Americans being spied upon illegally while executing duties directed by the president and under the authority of the Director of National Intelligence. One CIA contractor assisting with the DIG's investigation into the events that transpired between 2022 and 2023 was fired by the CIA one day after meeting with the DIG. When the DIG ceased operations, the CIA also took back 40 boxes of JFK files and MK Ultra files being processed for declassification by DNI Gabbard.
Okay. So one day, the CIA went into Tulsi Gabbard's offices, and removed 40 boxes of information. We're not talking about the 60s. We're not talking about the 90s. We're talking about months ago. So the question is this still going on? Well, people are certainly trying to hide it, which would indicate to me that something's still there. What it is, how many people are involved, how deep it goes, I don't think we know yet, but it is incredibly worrisome. I want to underscore, too, again, one last time, that for years, one of the techniques that intelligence uses is to mix truth with fiction and try to pawn off truth in case something were to leak out, and make it, oh, well, that's just in the movies. Well, folks may remember this. Firestarter, a 1984 film about the daughter of a man treated with drugs, a man and his wife actually treated with drugs under secret government military tests. Was this part of trying to convince the public before they even had an inkling as to what was going on? That, oh, if you hear about anything or if anything leaks, it's all just, it's made up for the movies. Well, we will see.
Predictive programming.
Predictive programming is just about exactly right. Why don't we take a break, Todd? I think this is a big enough burger for folks to handle for the moment. We'll come back and we'll cover a few more things.
Yeah, I want to just add one more thing. Again, I like to see things at the global level. And if you look at Ukraine, where there is a vast fascist regime in place that openly flouts Nazi symbols, is building the biggest army in Europe with robotics, and 50% of the army is going to be mercenary force. You have something developed in the tyranny that's happening in Europe, which looks to me just like the Fourth Reich in many ways. So this is bigger than just hitting somebody with a machine to make them do something. This is all connected. But you're right. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
Well, in the case of hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, these are two medications that have been FDA approved for use in humans for decades. They are very, very inexpensive. Interestingly, available over the counter in almost every other country other than the US and Canada. You can just walk into a pharmacy and buy them like we buy Tylenol in much of the world because they're that safe. And we've known for decades that ivermectin has very strong antiviral properties. It has anti-inflammatory properties, and both ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are what we call zinc ionophores. They help to move zinc from the bloodstream into the cell, which is where it needs to be in order to fight off a virus. So lots of application for these, and we have every reason to believe that those drugs also will likely have some efficacy against H5N1 or a number of other respiratory viruses that we may meet down the road.
Every day, your data is being tracked, collected, and sold, often without you even realizing it. Big tech companies control your devices, your apps, and the information you share. From your messages to your browsing habits, everything is being monitored and stored. Over time, we've traded privacy for convenience, and most people don't even question it. But what if you could take that control back? That's where Mark 37 comes in. Mark 37 provides privacy-focused phones, laptops, and tablets designed to give you full control over your digital life. With secure systems, expert support, and simple tools, they make it easier to step away from constant tracking and data collection. Because privacy isn't just a feature, it's a fundamental choice. It's about protecting your data, your freedom, and your future. Take back control of your digital life with Mark 37.
Back to you, Bill.
Okay, so I guarantee we're going to learn more about MKUltra and all these programs that were underneath it. Highly recommend folks go to that website we showed you, cia.gov/reading room, and do your own research. It will help you come to grips with the fact that this is unfortunately very, very real. And if that weren't enough this week, comes this announcement from Douglas McGregor, a good friend of CDM. The Anthony Weiner laptop details to go public. This was published yesterday, and at the time we cut this, it had just under 1 million views. Folks will remember that Anthony Weiner was husband to Uma Abedin, who was a close confidant and perhaps, I guess, chief of staff for Hillary Clinton in the run-up to the 2016 election. And folks said there was a period where he got himself in hot water. They started looking at his laptop. And a number of apparently New York cops, as I recall, were part of the team to look at the contents of the laptop. Some of them were reported, according to, I believe, Sidney Powell, unable to avoid running to the bathroom to vomit when they saw some of the things that were on this laptop. Where we go now?
It's worse than that, Bill. 7 of them died after looking at the laptop.
I had forgotten that detail. Thank you for that.
So they were killed, I think. I can't prove that, but they were killed for looking at the laptop.
So, and now we hear that this is going to be made public. So literally, if you think this through for a moment, earlier in the year, we learned more about JFK's assassination, at least some. We found out relationships between Khrushchev and Kennedy that most people never knew about. We've learned other things about Epstein, although not everything yet. Now we learned about MK Ultra, and it appears we're getting ready to learn some, maybe all, of what was contained on the Anthony Weiner laptop. Feels like a storm brewing. So this was going to be very interesting as we go forward, but we will have more details on all of it as it comes out. Let's pivot if we can. We're going to save to the end of the show some observations about the celebration that happened yesterday in our capital and really across the country, and make some comments about some things that happened that apparently put a little wrinkle in the day. But we will see how that played out and be able to share some of the scenes and some of the excitement from the event. So with that, let's if we can, Todd, let's move to the topics that you wanted to cover, please.
Yeah, so one of the areas we have been focusing on is surveillance. And the surveillance system, the police state, the surveillance state is getting much more serious. And it's being driven by an Atlanta-based company, which is one of the vectors. It's called Flock Safety. We've reported on them many times. They are, officially a license plate reader, and the agenda, they say, is for safety and solving crimes. But it's more than that. They're doing much more. First of all, there's a lot of these cameras everywhere where, reading a tag may not be the only reason they're surveilling. They're also surveilling people. And don't take it from me. I'm going to play you a tape here from the CEO. And they're also using Bluetooth and other types of listening devices. So if you're parked near one of these devices and your phone is on, or your computer, they can listen to what you're saying on the phone and many other things. So it is definitely surveillance, but this is the CEO, and we're going to just play this video here so you can hear this.
This is terrifying. According to the CEO of Flock, if you even try to map where his cameras are in your city, you're a terrorist.
There's an organization called DFlock, who are semi-well known now, I guess, if you're interested in this stuff, who take a fairly aggressive approach in terms of counting the number of cameras and having a Discord channel where they talk about potential, activities to move against Flock and stop it expanding.
And then unfortunately, there's terroristic organizations like DFlock, whose primary motivation is chaos. They are closer to Antifa than they are anything else.
This is pretty ironic coming from the guy who proudly says he's putting hundreds of thousands of cameras across America.
But to your point, we have really 3 broad buckets of technology. We have devices that detect evidence. So, we mentioned a camera that focuses on car. We have cameras that focus on people. We have gunshot detection. That's really like things that capture that evidence. And then we have AI that decodes it. So one of the problems that we create unintentionally is, well, if you have 100 license plate readers, you now have a lot of information. How do you decode that with AI? And so we have a product we call Freeform that allows you to type in English language heuristics, something like, I'm looking for a Ford F-150 from the 1990s with a racing stripe and rust on the front. And we'll find that car. And then we have a third bucket of software and hardware that is really how do you deliver and respond faster. So we manufacture drones. So when a 911 call comes in, instead of having to wait for an officer to show up, boom, you click a button, the drone is there in 30 seconds, in 45 seconds. And then a handful of software products that also help deliver that same kind of rapid response.
And the time frame on when you think crime will
disappear,
no longer exist?
Well, I think the cool part is that it's really a 2-step evolution. Like step 1 is you have to solve crime. So if you look at all of the primary research on the topic, so not my opinion, but what academics have studied.
They're not even hiding the surveillance state anymore. They're building it in plain sight. Hell, even the name Flock fits perfectly with Animal Farm, a George Orwell book about a totalitarian state. But it somehow gets even worse. The CEO openly admits that many of his own customers don't even know which type of Flock camera they have.
So we just started doing it and just kind of brute forced through pain and sweat. Our customers have no idea what version of camera they're on. They think they have the Flock camera. We're on version like 4.6 or whatever.
And that's important because these aren't just license plate readers. Some of them can also capture audio and collect digital signals from nearby devices.
This particular device does not have a camera in it. It has a very sensitive microphone connected to AI. It listens for, quote, sounds of distress. The only way it can detect sounds of distress is if it's always listening. And then what is the threshold for a sound of distress is a matter of policy. When the news segment aired, they showed me sharing my concerns about how this technology is going to be used.
In cities like Atlanta, you're almost always on camera. There's reportedly about one camera for every 10 people.
Atlanta has more surveillance cameras per person than anywhere in the US.
It's definitely very observable that you are being watched.
On the way here, I think I passed 20 Flock cameras. So my car was tracked 20 times just getting here. And the question is, do we really want to be living in this type of community where surveillance is now the answer to public safety?
But here's where it gets really disturbing. The CEO keeps insisting these cameras exist to keep everyone safe.
If we're successful, which knock on wood, we'll keep up that path. In 10 years from now, America as a country is a dramatically different place. It is a place where crime doesn't exist, where people are starting businesses and they're building families. And they will largely look back and they'll be, my kids will be in high school. In the US history book, there'll be a part about Flock and how because of Flock, we are a safer, happier, healthier country.
Then how do you explain officers allegedly using them to stalk their exes or to intimidate innocent people?
The scariest part about the 18 cops so far found to use the Flock system to stalk their exes, but it wasn't just their exes they were stalking. And we're not just talking looking up license plates a couple of times. This one police chief in Kansas alone ran his ex-girlfriend and her new boyfriend's license plates hundreds of times, using the information to then hunt them down.
We have cameras everywhere in that town. You can't get a breath of fresh air in or out without us knowing.
Right now, you're watching body camera footage of a police officer wrongfully accusing an innocent woman of package theft at her Colorado home after he used Flock evidence to target her.
Because you have not been honest with me, so I'm not going to extend you any courtesy of showing you a video when I don't need to.
But I can show you videos.
No, you cannot. I can show you.
Okay, show me then.
No, you're not being honest with me.
Now watch this. A journalist shows just how easy it is to hack one of these cameras.
None of the data or video footage was encrypted. There was no username or password required. These were all completely public facing for the world to see, and some of them still are. You don't have to be an expert to find and gain access to this.
He also demonstrates how they're programmed to lock onto things like your phone or even your face.
And rollerblade and then take a break to watch rollerblading videos on his phone. How? Because the camera's AI automatically zoomed in on it. Just like it zoomed in on a couple arguing at a street market in Atlanta. So what? They're still anonymous, right? No.
And these cameras aren't just on highways anymore. They're showing up next to playgrounds and public beaches, places where children play and where families go to relax.
Pretty interesting. If you want to come down and have a beautiful day at the beach, you are going to be tracked coming in and coming out. There's one over there, and there's this one here. These are the Flock tag readers, and they're at every single.
So, Bill, there you go. It's really, really disturbing. And we're going to stay on this story and make sure people at least are aware of it. This is nothing different than what's going on in China. I mean, it's exactly the same system.
Wow. Well, thank you for bringing that forward. That's amazingly concerning.
I've got a little bit of time with Pastor Dell, but we can save that for a next time. I'm not sure how much more you've got. But
let's see if I can get through the next two big topics, and then we'll gauge it, and we'll see if we can the pastor in. One of the things I wanted to call out, we've noted that in the past months, the White House, the Department of War, Trump himself has been posting things that relate back to the Q posts. And it's no longer at a point where you can ignore it. There's, how do you interpret it? What's the meaning? You often don't know the meaning until we get to the point of seeing what they meant later. Future proves past. Let's take a look at this, though. The White House announced a new website, and the website's address is www.whitehouse.gov/ and then you can see the question mark IL equals 41020. 41020, if you look at the fourth letter of the alphabet, 10th and 20th, what's it spell? DJT. Lights on for green for go, and then WWG1 WGA. Where we go one, we go all. And when you go to that website, sure enough, there's a White House website specially made to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the country. Fascinating. So we're not playing games anymore, gang. We are seeing the government itself acknowledge this. Now, what does it mean? What are they trying to tell us? I think they're trying to tell us pay attention for one point, and the rest we'll learn when we need to in time. All right, let's talk about the celebration for a moment, if we can. The day was planned to be just an amazing set of speeches and music and other things on the mall. Reports indicate that 300,000 or more folks showed up to it. But then last night there was late yesterday, there was the need to evacuate. And it was evacuate due to severe storms apparently coming in. And all the different agencies that were involved in making sure people were safe ordered this evacuation. And they even sent park rangers around to turn over tables to make sure people get the message, hey, it's time to leave. What they did is they sent them off the mall into many of the museums that bracket the mall on both sides and allowed them to shelter there. And then later in the evening, they announced that, okay, we've reopened the event, folks can return. And at the last number that I heard, when Trump began his speech just after 11 p.m. last night, about 180,000 of those folks had returned to listen to the speech and see the rest of the event as it unfolded. What was interesting was we ran across a video from someone we've interviewed in the past, a gentleman by the name of Edward X. Young. And he noted that they'd been ordered to evacuate, but kind of questioned, was this really necessary?
This is Edward X. Young. It's the evening of July 4th, 2026. It's very disappointing. I had front row seats already at the on the ellipse at the great stage there for the Trump rally, followed by the fireworks. And okay, we got reports of possible inclement weather. There's been a few drops of rain and some heavy winds momentarily, a few bolts of lightning, but no big deal. But they've allegedly they claim it's delayed, that they evacuated the Great Mall for a threat of severe weather. Yet it's not that severe. And one of the 3 points where they said to go for refuge was the African American Museum, Barack Obama's museum. I'm very tired. I walked all the way here. My feet are killing me, and they're telling me, no, there's too many people inside. You can hang out in the property, but we can't let you in. And it's starting to rain, so this is a very disappointing 4th of July, and something tells me this is a bigger threat than just the weather. I know things. You know.
So very, very interesting. Ultimately, they were able to continue and finalize the event. I think they got done sometime between 12:30 and 1 o'clock in the morning. Let's see, depending on how long your pastor piece is, Todd, we might be able to do it now, or I can show these two pieces of the fireworks event.
Well, I won't play it all, but I sat down with Pastor Gettr of the Congregational Church in Woodbury, Connecticut, and I think he's got some wise advice. So we'll play this, and let me just run an ad real quick from David Cross, who's one of our big sponsors. You can bear with me for a minute, then we'll be to Pastor Dell after this.
Do you already have your investments with Fidelity? I'm David Cross with U.S. Asset Management. Did you know that you can assign your investment management to my team and put my 35 years of experience to work for you? You simply assign us as your investment manager and you keep the same username and password. Professional management, and you get to work with someone who shares your values. Call U.S. Asset Management today and put us to work for you.
Okay, here we go with Pastor Gettr of the Woodbury Congregational Church in Connecticut. Pastor Dell, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Good to be back.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. So I saw, well, we'll get to your book in a minute, but there is, I feel there is, I mentioned an awakening or a unification happening with Christianity globally. Do you feel that in your position?
Yes, and I think that's part of one of the doctrines, great doctrines that come out of the Protestant Reformation was the spiritual unity of all believers, the priesthood of all believers, the doctrine of the invisible church. Not to diminish the doctrine of the visible church, which is what my book is about, but the invisible church is always a living reality, and I think you're sensing that.
Interesting. It's almost like it's some bigger force, obviously, than just humans doing it. It seems like the church is really coming together, and I maybe it's just because I travel to all these different places and I see it happening and people communicating and all of that, and people from the Levant where Christianity was born, really wanting to rediscover that and make sure it stays there and to grow that community. But what are you seeing in the great state of Connecticut, the cradle of liberty, where there's not so much liberty these days? What do you see happening in your environment?
Well, I see a resurgence among clergy, pastors of churches, pastors of old historic churches, but also new ones as well, coming together, realizing that they have to regrow their political muscle. And we had the last couple of weeks, I think, have been just headlines in Connecticut about why that's necessary. And I think that the Democrats are largely a group we can't really speak to anymore, but the Republicans we still have access to, and some of us pastors are making our voices heard.
Well, that's good to hear. So you're seeing it not, I mean, you've been a kind of a lone voice in the wilderness, that you see that growing in Connecticut.
I see it growing. I see other pastors, some are not as willing or as able to take the limelight the way I am, but they're working behind the scenes. They're talking to the elected officials in their towns and at the Hartford. They're organizing, meetups of other pastors. There's something called the Republican Assembly, which is a national body. We're organized here in Connecticut. I'm president of the Litchfield County chapter. Vice president is another pastor. So it's happening.
So that's really an issue. Are you seeing pushback or support from the GOP in Connecticut on that?
It's a bit of both. The GOP, like it is everywhere, is kind of at war with itself and sorting itself out. What it's going to be.
What's the feedback from your congregation when you're moving really in this? I would say, I don't want to say political direction, but you're speaking out to issues that you see in the community. What's the reaction?
Well, I have a lot of support from my congregation, and that's largely due to a unique dynamic that I get into in the book, which is that this congregation is over 350 years old, but it was on the brink of closing 6 years ago. So I didn't have a lot of membership to work with when I came. And so most of the people that have joined since then have come under in response to my preaching. So there's a lot of unity, and that's a blessing.
That's really interesting. Is it just your Congregationalist? Is it just your denomination, or are you seeing it in some of the other mainline churches?
I'm seeing it. I'm seeing this movement take root in other denominations, particularly in the Episcopal Church and in the Presbyterian Church.
Interesting. Good. Well, tell us about the book. What made you write it, and what is it? What are people going to get out of it?
Well, I think it's one of those things where I couldn't have written it until I got to this point in my life. If you ever sit down and you say, I'm going to write a book and nothing happens, that's a good indication you should just wait a little bit longer. So I got to my early 50s and realized I finally had the book in me. Earlier this year, a friend of mine said I should write it. And what it's called is called Exile and Return. And it's the story of my exile from one mainline Protestant denomination, the Episcopal Church, and my return, to my surprise, to another one, the United Church of Christ, which is my current congregation's affiliation. So they couldn't get rid of me, right? I just kept coming back. So that's the return part of it. But it's a memoir, and it's meant to be moving. It's meant to tell the personal story, the things I did right, the things I did wrong. But also, it's a look inside the institution, particularly the Episcopal Church, how it works, and how it worked, especially over the last 3 decades, to really make sure that conservative, biblical, and orthodox voices like mine were suppressed or sidelined.
Mm-hmm. It really has been one of the most impacted denominations. We have another father Episcopal priest down in Atlanta, who Troy Beecham, who was forced out of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And he has medical issues. He has Parkinson's, and the church actually tried to even take his medical care away.
Yeah.
It's really, I mean, you see that in a lot of these organizations that have been infiltrated with more this Marxist orientation, that there's punishment if you go against, the regime. Have you felt that?
There is.
Yeah.
Certainly, I felt that, and that was became very explicit after 2020. It was building from 2018 on. When I joined the Episcopal Church in college back in the early 90s, I was confirmed in the Episcopal Church, and that's when I first started to explore a vocation in it. Places like the Northeast were pretty much locked up. They were, there was, if you were conservative, you were not going to get through, but there was still quite a lot of variety and difference of opinion. The Episcopal Church was truly a big tent, I would say, through 2008, 2009, and then there was a split.
Your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
So my book is positioned in something that's a larger movement called the Reconquista, which is really the brainchild of Redeemed Zoomer, 23-year-old man now, who started this about 4 years ago when he was, I guess, just graduating high school. He now has 700,000 followers on YouTube, and I've been tracking his movement for the last 3 years, and really helping to establish a foothold for that movement in the Episcopal Church and in the United Church of Christ. The Wall Street Journal ran an op-ed in its Houses of Worship's column last Friday, profiling the movement. So what we're seeing is that the liberal progressive establishment in the mainline churches has really peaked, probably peaked around 10, 15 years ago. And it's largely old people at this point, and younger radicals, millennials who are, transgender, pushing the LGBT agenda. And it's in your neighborhood church. If you walk in, you're going to meet 10 people, 15 people who are old and tired. God bless them. They don't know what to do. These are churches that are ready to be reclaimed for their biblical purpose, for the original intent of their founders, frankly, for the original intent of the gospel in Jesus Christ. Certain denominations are going to be harder than others. The Episcopal Church is harder than the Congregational Church because of the way its government works. In the Congregational Church, every congregation is autonomous, but it's possible, it's doable. But what we're up against is an agenda that wants to see these churches closed and the land sold, or have the churches repurposed for low-income, quote-unquote, low-income housing. We're seeing that happen in Connecticut as zoning laws are just being railroaded through, that towns are losing home rule. So now if you've got a closed church on Main Street, you don't have to get a zoning variance. You don't even have to go to the town anymore. As of right, you can simply, put in a 10-unit, multi-unit apartment building in there without any regard for traffic or parking or what it will do to the neighborhood character.
Yeah, no, it's horrific. The zoning issue is really a sneaky way they've come in to destroy, I think, the communities. I mean, that's the intention, to make it, you live in the pod and eat the bugs.
That's right. Well, and they destroyed the churches first, and that's why 30, 40 years later, this can happen.
So I was talking, not me, but a friend of mine was talking to Catherine Engelbrecht, who started True the Vote, and one of the comments she had was, we don't need more patriots, we need more believers. And it seems to me that Christianity is the only way through this. I was talking with a Ukrainian friend of mine. He's just torn up over essentially Christian fighting Christian in Eastern Europe, and the death and the destruction of and depopulation and ethnocide of his whole world. I mean, and I just said, look, man, the only way through is through faith. I mean, what do you see that?
I do see it. And, there's, especially online, you've got the trad Catholics, the Ortho Bros, the radical Protestants, or the Reformation guys. And, some of those debates I'm certainly willing to have an argument with anyone about, the solas, the principles of the Protestant Reformation, but we have to get on the same team here, because
Yes.
if you look at what's happening just, 80, 90 miles down the road from me in New York City,
Yes.
let's build a coalition here, people.
So true. We want to help you with that with our Connecticut paper, the Connecticut Sentinel. By the way, you're going to have an article on your book up there soon. So if you're in Connecticut, we'll put it on the main global channel as well. What's the name of the book, by the way?
It's called Exile and Return, and you can pre-order it now at exileandreturn.com. And the pre-orders are what's going to help me get it published. So buy one, buy two to give to a friend.
Well, we have a publishing company if you ever need a publisher.
I appreciate that.
Throw that out. All right, Bill, back to you let's close this out.
Okay. So a couple things. One reminder, we talked last week about a special broadcast that will come on Tuesday evening by Martin Rodil, and he's going to speak about some very troubling connections that will, in my mind, put glue to all the different areas of evidence that Georgia patriots, Georgia election investigators and advocates have worked on for 5 years. And Mr. Rodil will bring forward information that I don't think many people have paid attention to, if it even has been out. And it will begin to make sense of what we found and what those facts mean in the greater scheme of things. And I think it's an important, incredibly important discussion in light of what has to happen to fix the elections, not just here in Georgia, but really around the country. So that will be Tuesday evening. We'll have out links to the channels that'll cover it on Rumble and X Tuesday morning, so that folks can join, and folks will be able to submit questions via the chat on Rumble. So more on that on Tuesday morning. All right, let's take a look at the event yesterday. I wanted to show the beginning and the end, just to give people a sense of how big an event this was. Now, having stood on that mall in almost exactly that position, I will tell you that it's tough to get a sense of the scale of what you're watching. You'll find the same recording on RSBN, on YouTube, and on Rumble. So if you want to see the entire fireworks event, you can look there. Let me skip over, and we will look at the climax, the finale, if you will, of the fireworks
I'm
event.
having flashbacks to Apocalypse Now, the scene where the F5s come in, Put your head down, big dog. It's going to be a big one.
Wait till you see this one. Stand by. An amazing evening, and it was a wonderful way to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and the founding of the country. And you could tell from the pictures there that so many people, hundreds of thousands, had a wonderful time in the mall and all over the country. So we hope everybody had a safe and happy 4th of July.
Okay, I'll be back live tomorrow on the Skiff tomorrow at 10 a.m. Monday through Friday Eastern on the Skiff.
Okay, that's great. And then we'll be back Wednesday with the next Georgia show. Thanks for being here.